Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube. This is going to be my second on My Week in Gaming. For your viewing pleasure this evening, we will be discussing my review of Uncharted 3, which I played over the weekend. I'll also be talking about Civilization 5, which I've had the pleasure of playing on Steam on my Mac. And I'll also be sharing some thoughts about Battlefield 3, which, if you want to stop watching the video after I've done the bits about Uncharted and about Civilization, you might want to stop then, because that's probably going to be a bit ranty. But, you know, you may find it funny. You can always try it, you know. Yeah. So, starting with Uncharted 3, obviously the follow-up to the critically acclaimed Uncharted 2, widely considered by many people to be the best game running on PS3, and I think that that's a fairly good claim. I think it probably is the best game on PS3. I don't think, and I'll say this right now, that Uncharted 3 quite hits the heights of Uncharted 2. I am going to talk a little bit about the story here, but I'm not going to add any spoilers in. So, basic plot. We meet Nathan and Sully in London, in the middle of seemingly handing over a ring to this Marlowe and this Tip and her sort of little gang. Turns out the money's fake, and it all starts going wrong. And over the course of the story, it all revolves around Sir Francis Drake, and particularly his circumnavigation of the world, which, through Drake's reading of Sir Francis's logs and all the rest of it, he realises is too long, and he starts looking for what happened to this lost time. Because according to Sir Francis's own logs, he spent 3 months in the Philippines, but actually, of course, we find out he didn't. He went to Arabia, and it all comes down to sort of running around trying to find this lost city of Ubar, which, as you're surprised to find out, has some supposed great mythic treasure which is going to make them all rich and allow them to live happily ever after in Disneyland. All good. So, if you've ever played an Uncharted game, or if you've ever played a Tomb Raider game, you know the score by now. It's a run and gun, third-person shooter with puzzles. It was also linear. There has been some complaining, apparently, about the fact that Uncharted is a linear game, that it's not a sort of open world-esque thing like Assassin's. I think this is a rather pointless debate, to be honest, because I would suggest to you that, with a couple of exceptions, all games are by their very nature linear, because you start at the beginning and you go to the end. There may be tasks that you can, prat about with doing in the middle, whether or not it's Assassin's where you're going out and getting feathers, or whether it might be even Skyrim where you're going off and doing all these other quests. Actually, Skyrim's maybe a bad example, because it's perfectly possible to get hugely high in the game without going anywhere near the actual main plot. But most games are linear. I think this is all about, the fact that you are effectively following a fixed path. But you know what? You do that in God of War. You do that in half of games. So I think that's a fairly poor point to pick the game apart. I do think that there are a couple of issues in relation to Uncharted 3. First, the positives. Graphically, this is one of the best looking games you'll ever see. It's utterly beautiful. The puzzles are all really good fun. Some of them, they're not really ever challenging, but one or two of them will probably have you sitting there with a cup of tea or a cup of coffee or whatever, thinking, so how do I do that? How? Which is always good fun, because then you're like, oh, I know where I am. We're not talking Portal 2 levels of sort of difficulty, but you'll have some fun trying to figure out where you're supposed to go. Graphically, this game is utterly incredible. I think that it's not quite at the level of Uncharted 2, which one of the main points there was all about snow. This is all about sand. The lighting effects in Uncharted 3 are incredible. However, I did experience some slowdown. There were a couple of scenes, actually quite early on scenes in the market, where I felt the game hadn't actually been optimised. Later on, when you got out into the open desert, it was exceptional. But there were a couple of glitches there. In terms of the actual gameplay itself, again, as I said, you know what you're getting. One of my concerns is that if you go into this game having played Uncharted 2 and think that you're going to be walking through this, be aware of the fact that the combat is much, much, much harder. And, which I can understand why they've done it. The only point I would make is that they should have actually reduced the difficulty of some of the enemies. There was one particular area involving a sort of a rusted old ship and swimming around, that kind of thing, which I died on a huge number of times. I don't like spawning enemies. I've never liked spawning enemies. I've never liked the bullet sponge enemies, and I just felt that if they were going to do that, if they were going to make the enemies more difficult, and this time the enemies, for example, will run around the back of you and try and outflank you, and they'll come and get you, and there'll be a number of times where you'll be crouching down, and suddenly somebody will come out of left field and start punching you. If they were going to do that, then I actually felt they kind of needed to make the enemies a little less lethal, or that they would die more easily, because otherwise you were just basically being swarmed and overwhelmed. And there were a couple of cases where it felt like you were playing, almost like playing a Left 4 Dead game, but the other side had guns. Suddenly it's enemy after enemy after enemy, you're being swarmed over. So that was a bit of a negative. Going back to positives, there are no boss battles to speak of in Uncharted 3. I cannot tell you how much I love the fact that they didn't go down the route of last time. There is one sort of bossy bit, but again, this comes on to one of the other problems I have with the game, which is that they do actually repeat the trope of put you in area, wall goes up or door gets shut and 4 or 5 enemies pop out and you have to clear the area before the door. I mean, that's almost like the sort of the God of War-esque, walking in, spear thingies go up, and then, Medusa and her cronies pop out and you have to kill them before it goes down. And it was just quite jarring. You had these amazing set pieces involving planes, involving all these other kind of things, none of which actually I felt ever got to the quality of Uncharted 2. I still think the train sequence in Uncharted 2 and the helicopter sequence are some of the best things I've ever seen. These were brilliant. They weren't quite that good, but the problem was that you were constantly being sandwiched into, go into area, shoot stuff up. And as beautiful as the settings are, and as beautiful as the graphics are, the problem was I felt that after a while, it didn't matter whether I was on a ship, inside a plane, in an old temple. Who cares? Ultimately, I'm doing the same thing again. And I actually felt that, whereas in Uncharted, the difference between Uncharted 1 and Uncharted 2, they'd fixed that. They hadn't, gone down it. I felt that they almost, in this one, they'd fallen back into that trap of just sort of replaying the same basic mechanic, and every time throwing more and more powerful enemies at you and that kind of thing. So Uncharted 3 is fun. It's great. You can complete it almost in 2 sittings. The voice acting is superb. The motion capture is superb. All of this stuff is great. Just be aware that it can get a little bit samey. I think that the length of the game is exactly right at about 5 or 6 to 7 hours. I think if it had been any longer, I would have probably started getting bored of doing the same thing again. Great dialogue, great story, great puzzles, but as I said, the shooting is much more difficult, and you might find yourself rage quitting a couple of times with the sudden spikes in difficulty when you get into these kind of arena gunplay areas and things start going wrong. Particularly the one involving the rusty ships and the water, which I hated. Anyway, so that's the first thing. Great game, go buy it, just be aware of a couple of things. Turning to a completely different style of gameplay, I've been playing Civilization 5. I've downloaded the Gods and Kings expansion pack, which I am very pleased to see has put in a couple of things that they took out in Civ 5, because a couple of people had said to me before I bought it, Civ 4 is the ultimate Civilization, Civ 5 has kind of dropped the ball a bit, and I agree with them. A lot of the things that as a dedicated Civilization fan I've come to expect, stacking, espionage, religion, all this kind of stuff had suddenly gone. And it almost seemed as though the designers of Civilization 5 felt that they needed to go up against the medieval crew, because I felt it was very, very similar, and it had become a hell of a lot similar to Medieval 2, and the Total War series. And I just felt that, on the one hand, that Civilization and the team playing a compliment to Medieval, as good as that game is, but I just kind of felt that they didn't need to, because the people who play and buy Civilization, we know what we're getting. What we are interested in, in a sense that basically we've been playing the same game for about 10 to 15 years. A lot of people would suggest that the best version of it, Civilization, was probably Civilization 2. I would still say 4 is extremely good, I think, but 2 was incredible, let's not pretend. Obviously, as we've gone on, we've had cinematics, we've had animations of battles, and all that kind of stuff's been added. Civilization 5 does add in the giant death robot, which when I first saw it I thought was one of the greatest things I've ever seen, so that's fantastic. But I felt it was lacking quite a few things. For example, the old ability to go in with a spy and to destroy things and to potentially even plant nuclear bomb was gone. And I thought, well, where the hell's that gone? I used to love doing that. With that sort of, Xenia Onatop-esque sort of Russian-y lady who could sort of pop across the map. So I'm very glad to say that in the expansion they've added that kind of stuff back in. I think that's great. I think Civilization 5 is a superb game. I don't think it's as good as 4. I don't think it's anywhere near as good as 2. Again, partly because they seem to have tried to match Medieval, and what they should have done was realise that actually they had a system which people loved. I mean, I played both. I'm happy to play Medieval if I want to play something different, but that's not really the point of Civilization. So I understand why they did it, but I kind of feel that in a sense they shouldn't have bothered and they should have just stuck with it. You can buy all this stuff on the Steam store. There's a huge sale going on at the moment. You can pick them all up. In fact, you can pick up a huge number of the Civilization games, including Colonization, which isn't great. It's all right, but they come as a great package deal. Go out and buy them. You'll love it. Final thing, at which point you can rage quit and leave now if you don't want to hear this. Is Battlefield. Now, as you may know, Battlefield 4, the beta, has just been announced, which probably means that we're going to be looking at a 2013, maybe even late 2013, early 2014 release. Now, I'm not a Call of Duty guy. I have no interest whatsoever in that just kind of run around and Twitch shooter thing. I just find it quite boring. However, I've been playing quite a lot of Battlefield multiplayer recently, and there are two things I have to say which are beginning to annoy me. First of all, when you are the single assault marine running around on the ground and your entire team are poncing about in the air with their fighter jets or their Apache gunships or whatever, which is fine, great. But if you're playing a conquest game, as I usually am, I can't be really bothered with the others. That is absolutely useless. And the number of times, right, you find yourself being the only guy running around on the floor, just going, where is everybody? It's like, and it's always some Russian or bloke going, great, cheers, mate. Flying overhead, can't fly, smashes into the thing, immediately respawns back in the helicopter and does it all again. Stop being a brat. Come down and help. We need people on the ground. I've got very, very bored of tanks as well. I think they're overpowered. If you've ever watched an RPG hitting a tank, it usually takes one shot and it'll blow the treads off the tank and immobilises it, with the thing where you're going to shoot it and you're coming back and you shoot it and coming back. And I also think there's a problem with the way that they currently identify people. I think that, frankly, we need to have a system where irrespective of which team you're on, you have a symbol floating above your head, because the number of times, you pop around a corner and you get shot to pieces. And the problem with it now, in a sense, is everybody is like level 50, 60, 70, 80, 100. They're all absolutely bloody lethal, and it's only by pure luck that me as a level 22, 23 staff sergeant or whatever I am, are able to get a couple of kills. I mean, I played a sort of earlier, I played like a random spawning sort of team deathmatch thing, and I got slaughtered because they've all got guns that will kill you within half a second. So I'm not sure that I think the thing at the moment with the Battlefield is they're not really sort of trying to put like for like, because they're not putting levels alongside the same levels. They're just mixing everybody in, which means particularly if you're fairly newish players or the people who are slightly lower like me, you're just getting absolutely shot to pieces and killed. Although I played a second match and I got a positive kill ratio, so could be worse. Anyway, so that's my thoughts on gaming this week. Hope you've enjoyed it. Hope you've not rage quitted already and thinking, who is this annoying British bloke in the purple shirt or jumper? Any comments, any questions, etc. Great to hear. And I'm hopefully going to try and finish off a couple of things this week. Going to try and finish off some of the Final Fantasy games. I know, trying to finish off Final Fantasy 13. I've only had it for 2 years. Stupidly long game that is. And I'll pop back next week and we'll do some more talking about other issues in video games. Cheers.